Good evening. First tonight, the damning report into mental health services in Wiltshire. It's found a persistent failure in the way Avon and Wiltshire Mental Health Partnership cared for a mentally ill man who went on to batter his elderly parents to death.
Bob and Elsie Crook had taken in their son after his mental health deteriorated. But although repeated assessments found he was a significant risk to others, nothing appropriate was done. Well, Dickon Hooper is in South Gloucestershire, where this report's just been published. Good evening, Dickon.
Good evening, Alex. Yes, as you say, it's just been published in the last 15 minutes. 330 pages of quite strongly worded criticism of that mental health trust, and also one in Lincoln where Timothy Crook was first treated. Let me just give you a flavour of the type of thing that it says. The assertive clinical management of Mr. Crook would have prevented the steady deterioration of his mental illness and the subsequent deaths of his parents. So for the first time, really, a direct link between his poor treatment and his parents' deaths. Sadly for the family, though, this doesn't go far enough. His sister Janice Lawrence wants to see yet more independent reviews of what happened in the run-up to her parents' death.
They were very sociable people. They used to go dancing every Saturday evening, and they used to run a tea dance for all their friends on a Wednesday afternoon.
Bob and Elsie Crook were just trying to help their son Timothy, but paid for it with their lives. He'd moved back in after being treated for a delusional disorder in Lincoln. They didn't know how ill he was, but he was on the radar of 2 mental health trusts. His sister Janice repeatedly asked both of them for help, and the report she's seen says he was failed by both, and that this lack of care ultimately contributed to his parents' deaths.
It was devastating. They were such a big part of our family. You know, every time there's a birthday, a celebration, a Christmas, they were always there, and we will never get over what's happened. But I think the thing that's been the most damaging is what's happening now with this report. I think they deserve the truth, and we're not getting the truth. It hasn't gone far enough. There are too many discrepancies within the reports.
Where do you go now?
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
The report says the trusts knew Timothy presented a significant risk to the safety of others, but failed to deliver the required standard of care and treatment, and systematically ignored policy and procedure.
This is one of the worst cases of negligence that I've seen reported. I've already advised the family that there may well be a claim for compensation, although of course their priority at the moment is the report and the recommendations, and seeing those recommendations implemented to ensure that this type of tragedy doesn't happen again in the future.
The report Janice showed us makes 23 recommendations to the 2 mental health trusts. None of them will bring her parents back. Well, Janice Lawrence left this building about an hour and a half ago in tears. Clearly, that report offers her no form of closure. She said she hadn't had an apology from the Mental Health Trust until today. Both of them have since apologised and said they offer their condolences and they accept the report in its entirety, particularly those 23 recommendations, which they say they're now working through. But one of the most difficult aspects of this is that Janice repeatedly, as I said in the package, asked for help for her and for her parents, who were themselves classed as vulnerable adults, and she was in effect ignored. This is a point I put to the Avon and Wiltshire Mental Health Partnership, who were responsible for Timothy after he'd moved back in with his parents in Swindon.
She asked for help from us, and she asked for help from other agencies, both in Swindon and in Lincolnshire, which is of course the other trust involved in this case. She was absolutely right. We didn't hear the cries of her and her family, and therefore this, that led to a deterioration in Mr. X's mental health. Nobody will resign. The report doesn't indicate that actually either resignation or disciplinary action is the most appropriate way of dealing with this. What we're talking about is what we can learn as an organisation and what we can put in place to mitigate such events ever happening again.
Well, it's not just this case, is it, Dickon? The mental health services are also under fire tonight for the way they dealt with another man.
That's right, that's the death of Carl James, again in Swindon in 2007, killed by his schizophrenic friend Matthew Harris, who was jailed indefinitely. That's another big report that they've been wading through here. Again, it effectively says that Matthew Harris was let down by Avon and Wiltshire Mental Health Partnership, and that the poor treatment he received, and in particular the lack of management direction, were contributing factors to Carl James's death. So a bad day for mental health services in Wiltshire, with 2 reports into 3 deaths. Back to you.
Dick and Hooper, thanks very much.